Hi, welcome to the Migration Narratives Project Showcase. I'm Tiffany Pewitt. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Diversity and Civic Life, and we're very happy to have with us today two of our Migration Narratives Project's grantees, Liz Moskowitz, who's going to share with us holding on, what we choose to keep, and Moureen Kaki, who will tell us about her project, Palestinian Stories from Texas. Liz and Moureen will both share their work with us, and then after that, we'll have some time for some Q&A. So we'll get started with Liz.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz. I am a photographer and filmmaker. And I don't really even remember how I found out about the grant. I was like on the IDCL's website for something else. I don't know. I was just like looking around. I don't know how I landed there, but I saw the grant posting and I thought, oh, this is such a good opportunity to do a project that maybe I wouldn't otherwise, because there's funding available. And because it was focused on immigration, I thought about my dad, who's an immigrant, and kind of like a story about, or thinking through ideas of what I would want to show about his life and his story. And so I came up with the idea of photographing like a portrait of someone and then a portrait of something in their home that is symbolic of their experience as an immigrant. And then I've always wanted to incorporate people's handwriting into the photos that I take, because I want to be able to put as much of them into the final piece. And so by using someone's handwriting as opposed to typing it or like not having any kind of written word, I just feel like it really makes it feel a lot more real, and it makes it more about them than about me as the photographer. And so I'm going to share my screen so that y'all can see. And ultimately, I decided I want to photograph 10 people, and I wanted them to be from different countries from all over the world. I felt like I wanted ultimately for people to kind of see themselves in different people. So even though people were from all over the country or all over the world, maybe you could identify with something that they chose, like wanting to sort of represent like the connectedness between us all, and also the nuance of being an immigrant. Like there's not one story fits all, that it is really multifaceted. And okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if that works. Oh. Okay, telling me that I need to open system preferences, security, and privacy to grant access. Sorry, let's see. Hold on one. Okay. Let me see if this works. Okay, can you all see my project?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, this is, I kind of wrote a little intro piece. I guess I'll just read it. So our homes contain items that hold great personal significance, objects that represent our pride, humor, sorrow, hope. They reveal the lives we used to have or the ones we hope to live. Each triptych portrait includes a person who has immigrated to the US, a household item they selected, and a handwritten note that describes why their chosen object is important to them and their identity as an immigrant. What did people have to leave behind? What did they choose to bring with? What newfound items have brought meaning to their lives in America? As the project unfolds, so too will nuanced stories, which I hope will provide viewers with an expanded perspective on the varied experiences of immigrants living in the US. And I think what also drew me to this is, and I'll show you my dad first, because I was able to include him, is my dad is the child of Holocaust survivors, and he was born right after World War II. My grandparents met when their camps were liberated, and they met in like line waiting to get food. And so it's a long story, but what ultimately ended up happening was my grandpa was sent to Siberia, and my grandpa and his twin sister, my grandma, came to America on their own, right? They like, came on a ship to, Ellis Island and made their life here. And it was really, really hard. And they didn't have a lot of things. So I don't know a lot about my family. There's not a lot of old photos of great grandparents, or a lot of old keepsakes or mementos or heirlooms. And so I think I think about that a lot when I think about what people have. And so I think that also drew me to this idea. So this is my dad. I won't read every single person's, but I'll read his because it's obviously close to me, and then I can kind of go through the other ones. Because I was able to meet a lot of different people and just learn about a lot of different cultures and experiences. But so this is my dad and his handwriting, and it says, "This photography shows where I had my beginnings." And it's a photo of my grandma and my dad and his sister while they were still in Germany, in Berlin, before they had to come to the US. "This photography shows where I had my beginnings in a country that began a terrible war, leaving millions dead. And yet out of this horror, new lives and new hopes found new life. These hopes, however, were planted in America when my mother's sister and I sailed into the New York City harbor, greeted by the Statue of Liberty. Our new home provided the family with the knowledge that we would not be persecuted for who we were, an undeniable relief for my mother. But of new status as immigrants brought with it common hardships with regards to making a living and connecting to a new culture and its prejudices towards newcomers. Even after so many years, I still feel a kind of difference. Whether good or bad, I don't know, but it sometimes gives one the feeling if one is really at home." And so, and it just had such a profound impact on my own life. That even though I'm from here, I definitely feel like it resonates with me a lot. That feeling that my dad has. And so this is Raquel from Honduras, and she chose this wooden tool. It's called a hudutu, and it makes a dish that is specific to her culture. And and her people face a lot of discrimination right now in Honduras. So it was really special, and she made me food with it. It was just such a special experience. This is Julie, and her daughter translated her note, but she chose that glass bottle that's specific to it's a craft that's done where she lives, and it shows kind of a countryside scene. This is Vlad. He's from Croatia, and he chose it's a planner that he got from his grandparents' apartment, and it has a map of Yugoslavia when it was still intact. And when he was a child, that's when there were civil wars and everything got fractured. And so it's a reminder of how things were before, he had to endure living through a war and being a refugee. This is Jean. This is a statue that her daughter gave her. Jean's from India, and it was a really big deal when her daughter got a job working at an ice cream shop in the US, because when Jean was living in India, she never would have been able to have gotten a job like that because of the caste system. And it would have because of the case that she was in, it would have like been seen beneath her. And so she was just so proud of her daughter to have a job and be able to make money and be independent. This is James, and he actually just got here. When I photographed him, he'd only been in Austin for a few weeks. And I met him through a nonprofit in town, Casa Marianella. And he loves education. He's here. What he chose was a GRE book because he wants to, go to school, and he wants to get educated and get a good job. This is Belly, and what she chose was this piece of clothing that's really indicative of where she lives or where she's from in Colombia. Oh, where's his name? This is Kosai. I have to fix this, sorry. This is Kosai. He's from Iraq. When he was a little boy, he was in a field where a landmine erupted, and he is blind. But he goes to school. He's going to UT. He's getting his master's in social work, and he chose this. It's like a special sort of tea kettle, and it was his dad's. This is Natalia from Russia, and she chose a photo of her and her mom, who she hasn't been able to see for years. And I think lastly, this is Ben's, and he is a survivor of human trafficking. And he is now like a leader. He's also in school, and the pin represents like a training that he did to become a human trafficking leadership academy scholar. So he's using his experience to do good and to empower himself. Yeah, so that's everyone. And that's my project.
Great, thanks, Liz. Yeah, let's go ahead and go with we'll let Moureen present next, and then we can do all of the questions at the end, if that works for everyone. And we'll let you get started, Moureen.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so I'm Moureen. I am a graduate student in anthropology at UTSA. I am Palestinian. I was born and pretty much raised in Texas. I got the opportunity to live in Palestine when I was younger, which definitely ended up shaping a lot of my life, of course, in ways that I couldn't have imagined when I was younger. And yeah, it led me to a lot of Palestine solidarity work. And I was doing that simultaneously while I was in my undergraduate, doing my undergraduate degree. And it often felt like a balance between like having to do one or the other. Activist work in general in the academy is really difficult for a lot of reasons. But I think it becomes increasingly difficult when you try to talk about Palestine, as evidenced just like by a lot of different sort of cases. So the grant was a wonderful opportunity to sort of put both interests, well, things that I do in a way together, I think that I was absolutely not able to, right? And I was told about the grant by a friend of mine who I was talking about my research to, and they were like, you know what, this sounds kind of like similar to what we're looking for in the grant. And it's funny because people don't often think about Palestine or Texas and migration and think about like Palestine. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, right? In large part because we imagine sort of Palestine, if we have imaginations about it that are rooted in like sort of strictly conceptions of what we get here in the US, then it's often tied to like stereotypes of, oh, this place has been in like sort of conflict or war, and it's religious, and it's been like this timeless this timeless conflict narrative, right? And it's not thought of as something that there are like, I think, a significant amount of Palestinians here, just by sheer virtue of like thinking about who the vast networks, like the organizing networks, and then also Palestinian like existence is tied dramatically to Texas in ways that are like highly political, right? And that's one of the things that the documentary gets into. I am not a filmmaker necessarily. I guess technically I am now that this is done and I made it, but it still feels weird to claim that title. I really felt like I was doing sort of like it's because I'm a cultural anthropologist, right? And my research interests are tied to Christian Zionism and understanding, ethnographically understanding Christian Zionism and how Christian Zionists imagine Palestine and Israel and imagine themselves in relation and their beliefs in relation to those sort of conceptions, right? And how those conceptions differ from the lived experiences of Palestinians and Israelis there, right? So the project, the film deviated from that in a little bit. It was, and my intention with it was to tell, like, to have Palestinians tell their own stories about ways that living in Texas basically affected their life, right? I kind of tried to keep that as an open-ended question in the interviews and keep the interviews really open to just try to get a sense of what folks would bring up, right? And not necessarily prompt things. And by and large, it was like explicit political forces that were that people felt were shaping their identity in contemporary ways, right? And that has to do with probably, like, I hesitate to frame it this way, but with social factors in Texas, right? And that's the large presence of Christian Zionism here in San Antonio that like really goes under the radar in a lot of ways. And also things like, you know, the more obvious ones like Texas anti-boycott, divestment, and sanctions laws, and other sort of legal. They're not always laws, but they're I forget what the legal language is, but they're like another thing that's discussed in the documentary. And I won't show it to you obviously because it's an hour long, so far beyond the means here, but it's discussed in the documentary, which is the Texas definition of the Texas adoption of the IHRA definition, which conflates anti-Semitism with anti-Zionist work in an effort to like target people who do Palestine solidarity work. And so this becomes like super complicated, right? Like these are very nuanced sort of histories and identities that are being implicated here in Texas, and often like the question or the conflict or the situation in Palestine is sort of deferred to as this distant entity, right? And then of course there's the question of tax dollars that all Americans pay to that makes the question of Palestine relevant to us here, in my opinion, also, right? So yeah, that's a lot of the background context for the project and who I am, because that all went into it. It was a very personal project for me in a lot of ways, because, and this is part of my motivation for doing it on a personal level, representations of Palestinians were never like what I felt my lived experience was like, and that's a problem, right? Like even NGOs or other like organizations or people who were pro-Palestine, quote unquote, or trying to help like progress the Palestinian cause, still had like an explicit sort of vision for what Palestinians should look like and how to present like our sort of struggle and our narrative. And again, that was so misaligned with like my own lived experience and the lived experience of a lot of people that I know, that I felt like there needed to be something that voiced Palestinian history by Palestinians and for Palestinians in a way that we could relate to one another, because part of like being in the diaspora, which is a result of like forced migration in this case, is the fragmentation of like our people. And so it becomes a really it became a really personal but still community wide, in a sense, as far as it's going to go, right? I hesitate to say that because it just depends on who sees it and how it affects them, but still it speaks to a community wide sense of connecting lived experiences across like different spaces and different different spaces that still were relatable, right? And that was speaking to like the basis of what in part, like, I think makes up the Palestinian identity in Texas. Yeah, and this is heavily tied, of course, and discussed in the documentary too, to questions of and issues of Islamophobia, right? Because often, again, I think there are a lot of reasons for this, but part of it is to do with the fact that the question of Palestine and Israel is like pitched as a religious conflict between like Jews and Muslims, which is like fundamentally not true. And also because, you know, I don't think we often have nuanced understandings of like even the distinction between like Arab and Muslim, and then the fact that like there are Christians within Arab majority countries and things like that, right? So we get wrapped up in this box that say like, oh, they're from the Middle East, right? And the Middle East isn't even like a place that's referenced, like we don't call ourselves Middle Eastern, you know. So it's this idea that we're breaking these stereotypes of this homogenized identity too, and bringing it back home, that I think is, or that I hope was what the film got across. But you know, yeah, I don't know if that was a full 10 minutes, but that's what I've got for you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Moureen. And thanks to both of you for sharing your projects, and they're really rich projects. And I know that there's a whole lot more that you could tell us about them. Does anyone have questions that you would like to ask? Anyone want to start with a question? Anyone in our audience? We're a small group, so feel free to just, oh, there you are. Hi, Benefshe. Go ahead. Oh, I don't think we can hear you. Are you there?
Hey, I am trying to do something. Hold on a sec. There's two of me, just a sec.
Oh.
Moureen, I just have a quick technical question. What camera did you use?
Oh, I should specify, I did not, I'm not that talented. I didn't do the filming. The filming and most of the video editing was done by Joey Martinez. He used a couple different kind of cameras, and one of them didn't even have a detachable lens, which I was surprised by. That was when he moved to it. But yeah, sorry.
Okay, well, I was just curious. Yeah.
Anyone else have a question that you would like to ask? So while folks are thinking of other questions, a question that I have for you both is, I'd love to hear more about your process and your experience in creating these projects, and particularly like as you created these projects, what came up for you that was most kind of surprising or unanticipated or unexpected?
I can go. Let me like pull it up. Yeah, the process was, I mean, y'all gave us so much time, and so that was really appreciated. I felt like I had a lot of space to really like think about you know, the idea that I was like, okay, I want 10 different people from 10 different countries, and maybe that'll take more time, but I had the time. So that was really nice. And I work a lot with nonprofits. So I was able to like reach out to people that I knew, but then also to new nonprofits, which was really nice to make that connection. And then to friends, to people I already knew. So that was really nice just to be able to like kind of like I pretty easily was able to find 10 people from different countries. And I feel like I could even keep doing the project, you know, and yeah, I mean, I loved getting to meet all these people. Like a lot of them I never met before. And everyone was so gracious and like inviting me into their homes, you know, especially during a pandemic, and just really, you know, I think they also liked the attention, not like they liked the attention, but they liked that this particular kind of light was being shown on their story. Like take Posai, for example. This is someone who's been through an immensely physical and psychological and emotional traumatic experience, you know, as a child, an exploded landmine, you know, affecting him and so, you know, his life in so many different ways. But like I wasn't there to talk about that with him, which I think, you know, he has had a lot of media attention around that. We were there to like drink tea and like for me to learn about this like special, I think it's called a dala, you know, tea container that his dad had given him, and his dad had just passed away, I think in the past year or so. And so it just felt nice to, you know, maybe, yeah, to like shine a light and like dedicate attention to something about someone's culture or their personal experience that maybe, you know, isn't super intense. And, you know, it's just two people getting together and like learning. And so I liked that about the project, which I didn't really realize until the end. And some of the people's stories, you know, and what they chose did lean more on the heavier side. But so it felt also nice. I with photography, it always feels like I like really love photographing people who maybe otherwise wouldn't get that attention or spotlight. And then to be able then to also give them the images as like a gift feels really special. And so it was nice just to be able to have that experience, which is like a gift for me, and then I can then give them a gift. So just like the whole exchange. And I really did get to learn a lot because I'm also interacting with people that I probably normally wouldn't have met otherwise, you know, like, and that's what I love about photo and film is you really get to sort of drop into these different, we all live in our bubbles. And I feel like I can drop into this bubble, and sometimes it's personal, like with my dad, you know, but I got to learn a little bit more about my dad and what he wrote, you know, like I didn't know all the things he wrote that he felt that way. So learning more about my own personal direct experience and then getting to learn about other people as well. Obviously, it just skims the surface. That is, I think, one downside to doing something like this, right? I hang out with someone for an hour. I don't really truly know them and their experience. I mean, I could probably spend years with them and not know, you know, so that's the one thing, it's pretty fleeting. And with a photo, you try to, you know, you capture that moment with the handwritten note, you know, but it isn't, there's always more. And so I guess that's like a feeling that I had too, you know, there's always more to dive into. And with something like this, when you're just meeting somebody once, it is limited in that way. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Liz. I had kind of, you know, obviously I sat and interviewed with folks, and some of them were folks that I knew, and some of them weren't. And it was so the process, the way that I went about it, we interviewed 10 other people, and then I included my own interview, just to sort of like like from a researcher standpoint, I felt compelled to like do the thing that I asked other folks to do, which was like share their narrative and you know, be vulnerable. And so like I I felt that if I was asking people to do that, then I needed to do the same, especially because I could in this sense, and in the sense that I was related to the group that was the topic of the film. And so, but the process was interesting. It was time consuming. I'm glad you had time, Liz. I think the nature of my project consumed it definitely took more time. I was also in grad school, so taking courses, so that's never fun. But
Yeah, also like I've done video before. Video takes 10,000 times longer.
Wow. Like
So,
this is my first experience with that, like filmmaking in general and stuff too. And I don't know anything about it. I'm just like, oh, can we do this? And you know, Joey would be like, yeah, I'll get back to you by like next week about that. And I'm like, next week. And then
yeah.
he starts to show me like the process. Oh, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That looks really intense.
Yeah, the editing, everything, and the fact that you did something that's an hour. Yeah, so there is a huge difference between photo video. So I get that.
Yeah,
I feel
totally.
yeah.
Yeah. It was great. It all worked out really well, but it got intense because, you know, out of 10 interviews, not including my own, there was like 17 hours of like footage that pulled up, because I tried to do the anthropological approach to interviews, which was like not minimize sort of like what I'm asking. Yeah, minimize sort. I didn't want to draw out from people. I wanted to give them broad questions and see sort of what were parallels and differences across people's responses, right? And look if it to see if this thing that was a distinct Palestinian identity emerged that was being affected and experienced by multiple people in different ways. And I guess I was surprised in a lot of ways, in a lot of good ways, right? I was surprised. I got to one of the coolest surprises was that I got to, and if you watch the documentary, you'll see my little like freak out moment. But as like I said, I've spent a long time organizing around Palestine solidarity work, and of course, one of the big cases that got a lot of notoriety was Bahia Maui, who was a speech pathologist with Pflugerville ISD, and she refused to sign her contract because it with as a speech therapist, because it included a promise on her part to boycott, divest, and not to forfeit a right to, or excuse me, to promise not to participate in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. And she refused on the basis that, you know, that's a basic, you know, free speech issue, and also her on the basis of her Palestinian background, right? And actually, Banafsha here was the one who introduced me to her via email, and I was just so busy with the project that I didn't put two and two together with her name. Banafsha linked me with her via email as a person who might be interested in interviewing for the film. And so she sends me we correspond, she sends me her address in Austin. And we didn't talk about the Pflugerville case until I started talking to her in the interview. And then she brings it up and I was like, wait a second, are you the speech pathologist from all those news articles in the lawsuit in Texas that, you know, changed? And she's like, I am. And I had this whole freak out moment in her living room, which was both embarrassing, but also really sweet. She was so nice about it. So yeah, besides that cool surprise, I was surprised at the extent to which like the community ended up being so small, right? Like I said, I connected with different people that a lot of people that I didn't know to interview, and there was still like, oh yeah, I know this person here, we organized in this sphere, and it was like on national scales and state scales that they knew each other in different places. And so that was really neat. But yeah, I think that would be it. Yeah.
Thanks. Anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask at this point of either of our speakers? And about their projects and their work.
Yeah, I'm wondering, what is the what is the one sort of nugget of truth that you came away with after this project? It doesn't have to be earth-shattering.
I can start. Yeah, it's a hard question. Because part of what I saw with my documentary was like that it was an opportunity to frame like what I say we, but to a large extent it was me, because I was behind the framing of it, right? And how to piece it together. But a large part of it for me was like being able to sort of tell our truth in a way that I'd never heard told before. And so it's hard to say, right? Because it's an oral history about like different, very complicated things. But I guess like, and this will probably only make sense if in context of the documentary, and if you're involved in like, or at least have contextual history on Palestine. But I think one of the things that I realized with my project that was really personal and sort of personally empowering was that like, and one of the folks in the film talks about this at the very end, her name is Lema, that like despite being part of a diaspora, there is like a fundamentally distinct Palestinian identity, and no matter like how far people are removed from that, our claim to that and the connection that we feel and are able to articulate to one another is not something that's ever going to go away. And I think that an obvious truth is that I hope to present, at least, and continue to articulate in the work that I do, is that we have to contend with that. So I don't know if that's a very clear truth, and I'm not sure other people would agree with it, but that's the one I'll stick with.
Thank you for that, Maureen.
I think, I mean, I was thinking about it now because I hadn't thought about that question. But what came to mind for me in this moment is like how little we know about each other. You know, like what I said before, we kind of all live in our bubbles. And a bubble can be a community, right? It can be a family, it can be like an individual. And I think it can be easy to think I think we live in a society that lends itself to like very binary, black and white kind of thinking, where it's like, this is the right way to do something and this is the wrong way to do something. Or like, this is like what my history consisted of. So probably everyone's upbringing or history, you know, consisted of that. But like, there's so little that we know because maybe we don't have we don't have the access or exposure to other people, or what we do learn is misinformation or, you know, is skewed and distorted. And so I guess getting to meet everyone that I did, I got to learn a lot about people as an individual and then as a representative of their culture. So something about their culture, but then also their attachment or the meaning that they create from their personal experience. And it's all because I was able to take the time because of this project. I wish everybody could do something like this. You know, I wish everybody could, like, I mean, truly like grow up in a place that's diverse and welcoming and embracing of like learning that we do know so little about one another. So like, let's not be so reductive. Like, let's be more curious and less like self-involved, you know? So yeah, I think we don't know that much about each other, and like ask people questions. Yeah, that's the way to learn more. So.
Thanks. I love hearing about both of your projects and how for both of you, I think, you know, your projects are significantly different from each other, but yet, you know, I do also see these kind of common threads, and that you've both you know, you've both worked with people to give them a space to tell their stories on their own terms, to tell stories that they may not, you know, have enough opportunities to tell, to represent themselves in ways that they want to be represented. And that seems, you know, so very powerful to me, and so very important. I think both, you know, for the individuals involved in the stories, but I also think for those of us who are viewing those stories as well, and kind of creating those more kind of complicated narratives that don't necessarily fit with others' kind of preconceived notions of who people are, and that's really important as well. I'm curious also if you imagine sort of next steps for these projects, or, you know, where you think this you may go with this work.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I have some ideas. I haven't actually made moves, but there's something called Photoville in New York where they have like exhibits on the street, and I feel like this could be a really cool one. I've also thought about I think it would be a great exhibit for the library, the main library downtown. They often have exhibits, and so I think this could be a really great one. And so I think, yeah, where I am with it is not like, I'm not going to continue shooting at this point and finding more people to photograph and interview, but I am interested in finding public ways to display it, because it feels like it's a good fit for public art installations. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Actually, we have a film screening planned right now. We're planning the details of it tonight, so but right now it's settled on March 25th. We'll be having an outdoor screening that I'll post, and be sure to tag the IDCL, of course, to keep y'all posted. But that's one of the things that we plan to do, and host a discussion afterwards about it. We're going to be hosting it with the organization that I did it with, Jewish Voice for Peace. It's the organization that I've been organizing with in San Antonio for a few years now here. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that we have planned. Definitely want to just try to continue to screen it to different communities, because I think one of the things also is that I feel like, and going back again to like my personal motivation for making this, was that I feel like especially when I was younger, I didn't have a lot of like connections to other Palestinians in ways. And so I feel like if this is visible even within small groups of Palestinian communities, that it would hopefully build solidarity. And so, yeah, that's another aspect of that I want to push, but officially nothing planned, but at the moment, but definitely looking to do more.
Great, thanks. So we have just a few more minutes left. Does anyone else have any questions that you'd like to ask our speakers this evening? No? Okay,
Can I ask another question?
sure, absolutely.
Maureen, back in the day when I was much younger, I used to make short documentaries, and I'm curious to know how you felt making the documentary. How did it feel to you? Was it hard? Was it joyful? Was it frustrating? Was it did you get into some sort of flow or not? Or yeah.
Yeah. Ben actually coming in with the hard questions today. Yeah, it was quite the roller coaster. It was there were parts of it that were joyful, right? Um, I mean, what part about getting a grant to talk about to meet other Palestinians and talk to them about their experiences, and then to try to represent that in ways that they agree with is privilege beyond like measure, right? But it was really hard. Yeah. This was again, I lived in Palestine, and that shaped a lot of my experiences, and it made me really understand what things like apartheid, like the practical everyday experience of occupation and apartheid and settler colonialism. And obviously, like we can talk about the effects of that here, but the way that the more direct violence that's experienced in Palestine is really like um, shaped me in a lot of ways, and it was navigating like the traumas of those experiences and then the fears that those traumas generated like within my own organizing work. So all of that like resurfaces throughout different parts of the process of making this, that made it more intense. And then the other thing was that it made me constantly question, like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this in ways that this group of people organizing are going to agree with? Do these people, like, because the point is that I wanted to represent a a connected Palestinian identity in a way, but also make sure to make clear that like the Palestinian community, the diaspora and folks in Palestine still are not a monolith, right? So trying to strike that balance was really hard, because it was balancing my own personal politics, my own personal lived experience, and then the variety of other lived experiences as well. And then balancing the responsibility of the fact that I was the one framing this in a certain way. So yeah, it was super hard. I'm and incredibly personal, and but also just an opportunity that I'm still processing, like the the benefits of, and in a way that I've made new friends that I feel like I've already known forever in a lot of ways, and also that just the privilege of being able to make something like this. I can't emphasize that enough. The fact that, like, we often talk about as Palestinians, like the guilt that we have of being in the diaspora. So it's both like here as and I'm going to stop soon, but here is a point of like here it's a point of marginalization to be Palestinian, but being Palestinian in the diaspora is a point of privilege because we're not subjected to occupation and apartheid directly, right? We experience it in indirect ways. So it's a very weird level of like guilt, joy, traumatic experiences, balancing political narratives that was difficult and frustrating and tiring, but incredibly rewarding. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Maureen.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your wonderful projects and just for all the excellent work that you've done. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We are recording this and we'll send out an email with a link to the recording so you can view again or share with other folks. And then we will have another, in a couple of weeks, we'll have another Migration Narratives Project Showcase to share more of our work. So we hope you'll join us for that as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful night.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank you all so much.